The nightmare always started the same way. Water. Black as oil, cold as death, rising in walls 50 feet high.
All right,
The
brother,
deck of the
salute
USS
complete. Oh,
Constellation
yeah. That
tilting
was
at
solid.
angles
Five
that
on that,
defied
man. You guys are
physics.
having too much fun.
Metal screaming.
Good to see you,
Men
brother.
screaming
You
louder.
too. It's been a long
And the
time.
hands.
Too long.
Always the
See you next
hands.
ride.
Reaching up through
Ready
the
to roll,
waves.
old-timer?
30
Born ready,
hands.
son. All right,
27
hang
of
on
them
tight.
disappearing before
Let's ride.
Dalton Pierce could grab them. He woke at 6 in the morning, same as every Tuesday, for the past 51 years. His heart hammered against ribs that felt too brittle to contain it. The apartment was dark silent, except for his ragged breathing and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Dalton sat up slowly. His knees protested. Everything protested these days. 78 years of living left marks that went deeper than the scars on his skin. He reached for the lamp on his nightstand. Yellow light spilled across the small bedroom, illuminating the gallery of ghosts he kept on his dresser. Vivian smiled at him from a silver frame, her hair still dark in that photo, her eyes still bright. That was before the cancer, before the hospice bed in their living room, before he learned what it meant to watch someone disappear slowly instead of all at once in a typhoon. Next to Vivian stood Nathaniel, 22 years old in his Navy dress uniform, looking so much like Dalton at that age it hurt to see. Nathaniel never made it to 23. An IED outside Fallujah in 2007 made sure of that. The third frame held no photo, just a folded flag. Red, white, and blue triangles pressed into perfect creases that Dalton had never disturbed. He stood, joints cracking like old floorboards, and shuffled to the bathroom. The man in the mirror looked carved from driftwood. White hair stood up in tufts that no amount of water could tame. Deep lines bracketed his mouth and radiated from eyes that had seen too much ocean, too much death, and too much loss. But those eyes were still sharp, still navy blue. Dalton reached for the pill bottles lined up on the sink like soldiers at attention. PTSD medication. The VA prescribed them like candy, as if chemistry could fill the holes left by drowning men. He swallowed 3 pills, dry, grimacing at the bitterness. Then he opened the small wooden box next to the toothbrush holder. The Navy Cross lay on faded blue velvet, its bronze ribbon somehow still brilliant after 5 decades. Dalton lifted it carefully the way you'd lift a sleeping child. The metal felt heavier than it should. Physics said it weighed maybe 3 ounces. Memory said it weighed 27 lives. He fastened the ribbon around his neck, tucking the cross beneath his undershirt where no one could see it, where it had stayed hidden for 51 years. Because heroes wore their medals with pride, and Dalton Pierce had never felt like a hero. He dressed in his usual Tuesday uniform. Flannel shirt, worn jeans, white sneakers that Vivian had bought him 3 Christmases before she died. Last came the cap. USS Constellation, the gold letters read, though they'd faded to the color of old brass. The fabric was soft from washing from weather from 12 years of Tuesday mornings. Dalton ran his fingers over those letters the way a blind man reads Braille. Another Tuesday, he said to the empty apartment. Another week survived. No one answered. No one had answered in 5 years. He locked the door behind him at 7:30 exactly. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky over Crescent Bay in shades of pink and orange that reminded him of tropical waters. Beautiful and dangerous. 8 blocks separated Dalton's apartment from the Harbor Café. He'd walked this road every Tuesday morning for 12 years, rain or shine, heat or cold, through seasons that blurred together like watercolors. The first block took him past the elementary school where children's laughter echoed from the playground. Dalton kept his eyes straight ahead. Children reminded him of the grandchildren he'd never have. The second block featured the hardware store where he used to buy supplies for home repairs when Vivian was alive, when there was a point to fixing things. The third block brought him to Veterans Memorial Park. Dalton always stopped here, always. The memorial was simple, a black granite wall with names carved in alphabetical order, wars listed by date, World War II, Korea, Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan, the forever wars that kept adding names in gold leaf that caught the morning sun. He stood at attention in front of the wall, his back straightened despite the arthritis, his shoulders pulled back despite the pain. His hand rose in a salute that muscle memory made perfect even after all these years. 3 seconds. He held it for 3 seconds exactly. Then he lowered his hand and kept walking. The fourth block took him past the soup kitchen where he sometimes volunteered. Not lately, though. Lately, leaving the apartment for anything except Tuesday coffee required more energy than he could summon. The fifth block featured businesses that kept changing. Coffee shops became yoga studios, became vape shops, became whatever came next. Progress, people called it. Dalton called it forgetting. The sixth block brought him to a bus stop bench where Jerome usually sat. Jerome was there this morning wrapped in a green Army surplus jacket, despite the mild October weather. His beard had gone from salt and pepper to full white since Dalton first met him 3 years ago. His eyes had that thousand-yard stare that combat veterans recognized in each other instantly. "Morning, Chief," Jerome said. His voice carried the rasp of too many cigarettes and too many nights sleeping rough. "Morning, Jerome." Dalton pulled a $10 bill from his wallet. Not the 5 he usually gave. 10. He could afford it this month. Barely. Jerome took the money with hands that trembled slightly. Gulf War syndrome, he'd told Dalton once. The VA said it wasn't real. Jerome's shaking hands said different. "You still wearing that cross, Chief?" Dalton's hand went automatically to his chest, pressing against the flannel where the medal lay hidden. "Every day," he said, "for the 27. Jerome nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Every veteran carried their own count, their own weight. "See you next week," Dalton said, "if I'm still here." It was the same exchange they'd had for 3 years, a dark joke that wasn't entirely joking. The 7th and 8th blocks passed in a blur of storefronts and early morning commuters who moved around Dalton like water around a stone. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody nodded. In a city of 50,000 people, Dalton Pierce was completely invisible. The Harbor Café sat on the corner where Main Street met the waterfront. The building was old brick, weathered by salt air and Pacific storms. A wooden sign hung above the door, hand-painted with a coffee cup and anchor. The paint was peeling. No one seemed to care. Dalton reached for the door handle at exactly 8:15. The bell above the door jingled as he pushed inside. The sound cut through the low murmur of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. Heads turned. Some smiled. Most went back to their phones. Morning, Dalton. Iris Donovan stood behind the counter, already reaching for the blue ceramic mug that hung on a special hook. Her own private hook, just for him. Iris was 44, but looked older in the harsh fluorescent light. Life had carved its own map on her face. The loss of her husband, Maxwell, 5 years ago. The struggle to keep this cafe alive when chains kept opening up with their identical logos and corporate smiles. But her smile for Dalton was genuine. "Blue mug's ready," she said, pouring coffee that steamed in the cool morning air. "Strong and black, just like you like it." "Thank you, Iris." Dalton took the mug carefully. It was chipped on one side from the time he dropped it in 2016. Iris had glued it back together instead of throwing it away. That meant something. He made his way to his table, corner spot by the window. View of the harbor and the flagpole across the street where the American flag snapped in the morning breeze. The table was small, scarred wood that had probably been here since the cafe opened in 1973. There was a burn mark near the edge. Dalton had made that mark in 2015, back when he still smoked. Back when he still cared about slowly killing himself. He sat down and the chair creaked under his weight. The same creak. The same chair. 12 years of Tuesdays compressed into this moment of routine that felt like the only solid ground in a shifting world. Dalton unfolded his newspaper. Local section first. He didn't care about national news anymore. The world could burn. He just wanted to know if the town council approved new parking meters. The coffee warmed his hands through the ceramic. He took a sip, closed his eyes, and for exactly 5 seconds, allowed himself to feel something close to peace. The bell above the door jingled again. Dalton didn't look up. People came and went. The cafe filled and emptied like tides. None of it concerned him, until the voices started. "I'm telling you, Brendan, this deal is going to change everything." The voice was loud, confident, cutting through the cafe's white noise like a boat horn through fog. Dalton kept his eyes on the newspaper. An article about the Historical Society raising funds for restoration. He tried to focus on the words. $2 million in commission, the voice continued. "Split 3 ways, that's still over $600,000 each. Colton, keep your voice down." This was a different voice, quieter, embarrassed. "Why we earned this. Let people hear about success for once instead of all this." The first voice paused. "All this government waste." Dalton's jaw tightened. His fingers pressed harder against the newspaper. "Exactly," a third voice joined in, younger, eager. "You see that budget report? Military spending is a black hole. Billions just disappearing. Most of it going to benefits for people who probably don't even need them," the first voice said. "PTSD, this, disability, that. Half of them are faking it." The newspaper crumpled slightly in Dalton's grip. "My grandfather was World War II, the second voice said. Normandy Beach. Never complained once. Never asked for a handout. These guys today want a medal for stubbing their toe. Dalton folded his newspaper very carefully. Precisely. The way Navy protocol demanded precision in everything. He took another sip of coffee, focused on the taste, on the warmth, on anything except the anger building in his chest like steam in a boiler. "Excuse me." The voice was right next to him now. Dalton looked up. 3 men stood beside his table, mid to late 20s, dressed in suits that probably cost more than Dalton's monthly pension. The one in the middle was tall, with styled hair and teeth too white to be natural. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry to bother you," the tall one said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "But the cafe's pretty packed. You mind if we share this table?" Dalton glanced around. The cafe was maybe 2/3 full. Several empty tables dotted the space. "I prefer to sit alone," Dalton said quietly. "Thank you." The tall one's smile hardened into something sharp. "It's kind of a big table for just one person," he said. "We're paying customers same as you." "This is my table," Dalton said. "I sit here every Tuesday." "Your table?" The tall one laughed, short, sharp. "You own this place." "Colton," the second man said quietly. "Let's just find somewhere else." But Colton wasn't listening. He pulled out a chair and sat down without asking. "It's a public cafe," Colton said. "Public seating. I'm sitting." His 2 colleagues exchanged glances. The quieter one looked uncomfortable. The younger one pulled out his phone. Dalton's hand trembled slightly as he lifted his coffee mug. Not from fear, from the effort of containing 51 years of rage into a 78-year-old body that shook with the weight of it. "Nice hat," Colton said, nodding at Dalton's USS Constellation cap. "What did you do in the Navy cook food push papers?" Dalton set down his mug carefully. "Precisely. I served 24 years, he said. His voice was steady, quiet, the way the ocean is quiet before a hurricane. "I don't owe you my story." "Oh, we got ourselves a hero here." Colton leaned back in his chair, spreading his arms wide like he owned the space. "Let me guess. Sat on a ship somewhere safe while real soldiers did the fighting." The younger colleague was filming now. Phone pointed at Dalton, recording. "This is great content," the young one whispered. "Boomer gets triggered." Dalton started to stand. His knees protested, but he pushed through the pain. He'd find another cafe, another table, another place where he could drink his coffee in peace. "Hold on there," Colton said, reaching out. His hand caught Dalton's arm. The grip was firm, controlling. "We're just having a conversation," Colton said. "No need to run away." Dalton pulled his arm free. The motion made him stumble slightly, his hip hitting the edge of the table. The Navy Cross slipped out from under his shirt. It hung there in the fluorescent light bronze and brilliant against Dalton's faded flannel. The ribbon was slightly frayed at the edges. The star gleamed despite 5 decades of being hidden. Colton's eyes locked onto it. "Well, well!" His voice dripped with mockery. "What do we have here, a medal?" He reached out and grabbed the Navy Cross before Dalton could react. "Colton," the quieter colleague stood up. "That's not. This is a Navy Cross," Colton said, turning the medal over in his hands like it was a toy. "Very fancy. Where'd you buy it, eBay?" "One of those military surplus stores." The cafe had gone quiet. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The espresso machine hissed into silence. Iris appeared at the edge of the table. "That's a real Navy Cross," she said. Her voice shook with anger. "Show some respect. Stay out of this, lady." Colton didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Dalton. "We're having a discussion about stolen valor here." "I didn't steal anything," Dalton said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Give it back." "How do we know it's real?" Colton held the medal higher, dangling it. "These things are all over the internet. Probably costs, what, $50? Give it back." Dalton's hands were shaking visibly now. Not from age, not from fear. From a rage so pure and hot it threatened to burn through his skin. "Say please, Grandpa." The younger colleague laughed. Still filming. Brendan, the quieter one, stood up. "Colton, this isn't funny anymore. Give him the medal." But Colton was enjoying himself. Dalton could see it in his eyes, the pleasure of having power over someone powerless to fight back. "I'll give it back when—" Brendan reached for Dalton's coffee mug. Maybe he was gesturing. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe it was genuinely an accident. The mug tipped. Hot coffee spilled across the table in a dark wave. It poured over the edge onto Dalton's lap, soaking through his jeans in an instant. Dalton gasped. The heat burned through fabric, scalding skin. He stood up fast, too fast, and his hips seized. Pain lanced through his lower back. His USS Constellation cap fell off his head. It landed in the puddle of coffee on the floor. The cafe erupted in gasps and movement. Iris rushed forward with towels. The quieter colleague backed away, hands up, saying, "Sorry, sorry, sorry," like a broken record. But Colton just laughed. "Whoa there, Grandpa," he said. "Careful. Don't break a hip." The younger one was still filming, still recording this moment for whatever social media platform would give him the most likes. Dalton looked down at his hat. His father had given him that cap when he enlisted in 1968. Nathaniel had worn it the day before he deployed to Iraq. It had survived 56 years of life, 2 wars, countless storms. Now it floated in cooling coffee, the letters USS Constellation bleeding into the brown liquid. Something broke inside Dalton Pierce. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet snap like a rope under too much tension, finally giving up. "I need..." His voice came out strangled. "I need the bathroom." He limped toward the back of the cafe. His pants clung to his legs, heavy with coffee. The burn on his thigh throbbed. Every step hurt. Behind him, he heard Colton's voice. "Need help getting there, old-timer. Want me to call you a nurse?" Laughter followed him. Not everyone, not Iris, not even Brendan, but enough people, enough laughter to confirm what Dalton already knew. He was alone. He'd always been alone, and the world had moved on without him. The bathroom door closed behind him with a click that sounded like a cell door locking. Dalton stood in front of the sink, gripping the porcelain edges until his knuckles went white. The mirror showed him everything he tried not to see. An old man, a relic, someone the world had decided didn't matter anymore. The Navy Cross hung against his chest, still damp from Colton's hands. Dalton touched it with trembling fingers. 27 names whispered through his memory. Mason, Rodriguez, Williams, Chen, Martinez, Baker, Sullivan. On and on, a litany of the dead that he recited every night before sleep. "Did I wear this for nothing?" he whispered to the mirror. The old man staring back at him had no answer. Dalton turned on the cold water and splashed his face. The shock of it helped a little. He grabbed paper towels and tried to dry his pants. The coffee had already set in. The stain would be permanent, like everything else. He thought about Vivian, about what she would say if she saw him now. Probably something gentle and fierce at the same time. Something about not letting small men make you feel small. But Vivian was 5 years gone, and Dalton was so tired of fighting. He decided, standing in that bathroom with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, that he wouldn't come back to the Harbor Cafe. 12 years was long enough. He'd find somewhere else. Somewhere people didn't know him. Somewhere he could disappear completely instead of just partially. Dalton took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, prepared to walk back out through that cafe with whatever dignity he had left. He reached for the door handle and heard it. Distant at first, then louder, growing like thunder on a clear day. The rumble of motorcycle engines. Not one, not two, 7. The sound shook the bathroom walls, shook the building, shook something loose in Dalton's chest that he thought was dead. He opened the door. The cafe had gone completely silent. Through the bathroom doorway, Dalton could see the front windows. 7 motorcycles were pulling up to the curb outside, chrome gleaming in the morning sun, black leather. Men who looked like they'd stepped out of every parent's nightmare about what their children shouldn't become. The engines cut off one by one. In the silence that followed, Dalton heard the cafe door open. The bell jingled, cheerful and oblivious. Boots hit the wooden floor. Heavy, deliberate. The kind of boots made for riding and fighting, and not caring what polite society thought. Dalton stepped out of the bathroom. 7 men stood just inside the cafe door. They wore black leather vests over long-sleeved shirts despite the mild weather. The vests bore patches that made customers shift in their seats. A skull with wings spread wide. Words curved above and below in Gothic script. Hell's Angels Motorcycle Club, Crescent Bay Chapter. The man in front was tall, over 6 feet, with shoulders that filled doorways. His beard was more gray than black, trimmed but wild. A scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, pale against tan skin. His eyes scanned the cafe like a predator assessing prey. Those eyes found Colton sitting at Dalton's table. Found the blue ceramic mug on its side, coffee still dripping onto the floor. Found Dalton's USS Constellation cap lying in a brown puddle. The big man's jaw tightened. He walked forward slowly. His 5 companions spread out behind him in a loose formation that looked casual but wasn't. They moved like men who'd worked together for years, who knew each other's rhythms. The big man stopped at Dalton's table. He looked down at Colton, who'd gone pale. When the biker spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, more dangerous than any shout could be. Somebody want to explain why there's a Navy veteran's hat covered in coffee on my cafe floor? Colton opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. The big man bent down and picked up Dalton's cap. Water and coffee dripped from the brim. He held it carefully, reverently, like it was made of glass. His eyes found the letters. USS Constellation. Something changed in his face. A flicker of recognition. Of memory. Of something deeper than anger. He looked up, scanning the cafe again. His eyes locked onto Dalton standing in the bathroom doorway, locked onto the Navy cross hanging visible against Dalton's coffee-stained shirt. The biker's breath caught. "Chief Pierce," he said. His voice cracked on the words. Dalton stared at him, at this stranger who somehow knew his name, knew his rank. "How did you—" Dalton started. The big man reached into his vest pocket, pulled out a piece of paper, folded and refolded so many times the creases were nearly worn through. He unfolded it with hands that trembled. "My name is Wyatt Brennan," the biker said. His voice was rough with emotion. "And I've been looking for you for 26 years. He held out the paper. Dalton took it automatically. The paper was thin, delicate. He unfolded it carefully. It was a letter, handwritten in shaky script. "To my son Wyatt, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I tried to be strong like Chief Dalton Pierce was. I tried to carry it the way he carried it, but I'm not as brave as him. October 12th, 1973. Typhoon Irma, Pacific Ocean. I was drowning. The ocean was bigger than God, and I couldn't swim, and I knew I was going to die. Chief Pierce jumped in after me, tied himself to the ship with a belt, and jumped into hell to pull me out. I was panicking. I grabbed his neck, nearly drowned us both. He punched me unconscious and dragged me back. When I woke up on the deck, he was screaming at the crew to let him jump again. There were more men in the water, 27 more. They wouldn't let him jump. The rope had snapped. I lived because of him. 27 others died. I never thanked him. Never found him after the war. Spent my whole life trying to be worth the life he saved. I failed. I'm sorry, son. Tell Chief Pierce it wasn't his fault I'm weak. Tell him I was grateful every day. Tell him he was the bravest man I ever knew. Love, Dad Garrett, Brennan Hospital Corpsman, USS Constellation, April 14, 1998. Dalton's hands shook so hard the paper rattled. Garrett Brennan. He remembered. Young kid, 22 years old, couldn't swim, panicked when Dalton grabbed him. Dalton had knocked him out cold with a right hook that probably broke the kid's jaw. Standard rescue procedure when someone's drowning you both. Dalton remembered pulling Garrett up, remembered the crew doing CPR, remembered Garrett waking up crying, saying thank you over and over. Dalton never saw him again after they made port, never knew what happened to him, until now. He looked up at Wyatt Brennan, saw Garrett's eyes looking back at him through his son's face. Your father, Dalton's voice broke. He made it home. Wyatt's jaw clenched. Until April 14th, 1,998 inches, Wyatt said. PTSD took him. Carbon monoxide in the garage. I found him. The cafe was silent except for the sound of Dalton's breathing, too fast, too shallow. I was 26, Wyatt continued. Same age Dad was when you saved him. He gave me 26 years. Because of you. Tears ran down Wyatt's face. He didn't wipe them away. I've spent those 26 years looking for the man who gave me a father. Looking for Chief Dalton Pierce. Looking for the bravest man my dad ever knew. Wyatt gestured to the 5 men behind him. This is Forge, Gunner, Viper, Wraith, Kodiak, my brothers. The bikers nodded. We ride for veterans, Wyatt said. For men like my dad. For men like you. He looked down at Colton, who'd shrunk into his chair. And we don't take kindly to people disrespecting them. Wyatt turned back to Dalton, held out his father's letter. He wanted me to tell you it wasn't your fault he was weak. But he was wrong, Chief. Wyatt's voice strengthened. He wasn't weak, he was hurt, and you didn't fail him. Wyatt stood at attention and saluted. Behind him, 5 bikers snapped to attention. 5 more hands rose in perfect salutes. Dalton stood in the bathroom doorway, coffee-stained and burned and broken, staring at 7 men who'd just turned his world inside out. His hand rose automatically. Muscle memory from 5 decades ago. The salute was perfect despite his trembling. For the first time in 51 years, Dalton Pierce felt like maybe, just maybe, wearing the Navy Cross meant something after all. The salute held for 3 seconds that stretched into eternity. 7 men in leather and denim standing at attention in a coffee shop, honoring a ghost they'd never met through the old man he'd saved. Customers stared, some with phones raised recording, others with hands over their mouths, tears forming. Dalton lowered his hand slowly. The motion took effort, like moving through water. Wyatt Brennan lowered his hand at the same moment. His eyes never left Dalton's face. "Chief Pierce," Wyatt said. His voice carried through the silent cafe like a bell. "Would you do us the honor of sitting with us?" Dalton looked at his table. At Colton, still frozen in the chair. At the puddle of coffee spreading across scarred wood. At 12 years of Tuesday mornings, reduced to a stain that would never come out. "I should go," Dalton said quietly. "I don't want trouble." "There's no trouble, Chief." Wyatt's voice was gentle but firm. "Just a son wanting to buy coffee for the man who gave him a father." He turned to Colton. The shift in Wyatt's demeanor was instant. The gentleness vanished. His jaw set, his eyes went hard as concrete. "You," Wyatt said. "Get up." Colton's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "I said get up." It wasn't a shout. Wyatt's voice stayed level controlled. Somehow that made it worse. Shouting you could argue with. This quiet command allowed no argument. Colton stood on shaking legs. "We didn't mean," he started. "You didn't mean to spill coffee on a Navy Cross recipient." Wyatt took a step closer. "You didn't mean to mock a man who jumped into a typhoon to save lives. You didn't mean to film him for your social media entertainment." The younger colleague's phone was still up, still recording. Wyatt's head snapped toward him. "Put that down." The phone dropped so fast it bounced on the table. Wyatt picked up Dalton's USS Constellation cap from the floor. Coffee dripped between his fingers. He held it like it was made of porcelain and prayers. "This hat," Wyatt said, "belonged to a man who served his country for 24 years, who earned the second highest military decoration for valor by risking his life to save strangers. Including my father." He looked at Colton. "What have you done that's worth even touching this hat?" Colton's face had gone from pale to red. Whether from shame or anger, Dalton couldn't tell. "We're paying customers," Colton said. His voice tried for indignant but landed somewhere near desperate. "We have a right to sit here." "You have the right to leave," Wyatt said. "Before I make you leave." The biker called Forge stepped forward. He was shorter than Wyatt, but wider built like a wall with arms. Tattoos covered his neck, disappearing under his shirt collar. His expression suggested he'd be perfectly happy to demonstrate exactly how they made people leave. Brendan, the quieter colleague, grabbed Colton's arm. "Let's just go," Brendan said. "This isn't worth it." But Colton pulled his arm free. He straightened his tie with shaking hands, trying to reclaim some dignity. "You can't threaten us," Colton said. "I'll call the police. I'll sue this cafe. Wyatt pulled out his wallet, flipped it open. Inside was a badge. Sheriff's Deputy, Crescent Bay County. "Please do call the police," Wyatt said mildly. "I'm off duty today, but I'm happy to file a report about harassment of a veteran. Destruction of military property. Assault." Colton's eyes widened. "Assault? We didn't." "You grabbed him." Wyatt nodded toward Dalton. "Witnesses will confirm. You stole his medal. You caused him to be burned by hot coffee. That's assault and battery in Oregon." The cafe murmured. Several heads nodded. An elderly woman in the corner spoke up. "I saw everything," she said. Her voice was clear and strong. "These 3 men harassed that poor veteran. They should be ashamed." "Absolutely shameful," another customer agreed. Colton looked around wildly. The cafe that had been silent during his mockery had suddenly found its voice. Now that the power dynamic had shifted, everyone had an opinion. That's how it always worked, Dalton thought distantly. People only stood up for you when you didn't need them to anymore. Wyatt gestured to a small table near the door. 2 seats, no window view. The worst table in the cafe. "You can sit there," Wyatt said. "Finish your coffee quietly. Then leave, and don't ever come back to this cafe." "You don't own this place," Colton said, but his voice had lost its edge. "No," said Irish from behind the counter, "but I do, and you're banned, all 3 of you. Get out of that chair and move, or I'm calling the real police." She held up her phone. Colton looked at Brendan, at Quincy, the young one who'd been filming. Neither of them met his eyes. He moved to the corner table. His colleagues followed like dogs with their tails between their legs. Wyatt turned to his crew, made a gesture with his hand, some kind of signal. The 5 bikers spread out around the cafe, not threatening, just present, a perimeter of leather and ink that said clearly this space is protected now. Then Wyatt walked to Dalton. Up close, Dalton could see the details he'd missed from across the room. The scar on Wyatt's face was old, faded to white. His beard was trimmed neat despite the outlaw aesthetic. His eyes were brown deep and sad, carrying the same weight Dalton saw in the mirror every morning. "Chief," Wyatt said softly, "your table." He pulled out Dalton's chair, wiped the seat dry with a bandana from his pocket. His movements were careful, almost ceremonial. Dalton stood there uncertain. His pants were still wet with coffee. His legs still burned. The Navy cross hung outside his shirt for everyone to see, exposed after 51 years of hiding. He felt naked, vulnerable. "I don't understand," Dalton said. "How did you find me?" "I didn't," Wyatt said. "Not on purpose. We ride every Tuesday morning. Stop here for coffee before our weekly meeting. I saw your hat on the ground and—" He paused, swallowed hard. Dad's cap was the same, USS Constellation. He wore it every day until he died. Wyatt helped Dalton into the chair with a gentleness that seemed impossible from hands that size. The other bikers pulled up chairs from nearby tables. They arranged themselves around Dalton in a loose circle, not crowding him, just close enough to make it clear he was no longer sitting alone. Iris appeared with a fresh blue mug of coffee. Steam rose from the dark surface. "On the house," she said. Her eyes were wet. "All of you. Breakfast, too, if you want it." "Thank you, ma'am," Wyatt said. "We'll pay double. Chief's coffee is free. Ours isn't." The biker called Viper leaned forward. He had silver hair pulled back in a ponytail and a face that looked carved from old leather. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle. "USS Constellation," he said. "My uncle served on her. 68 to 72. Said she was a good ship." "She was," Dalton said. His voice came out rough. "She kept us alive when the ocean wanted us dead." "Tell us about the typhoon," Wyatt said. He leaned forward, hands clasped on the table. "Please. Dad never told me details, just that you saved him. I need to know." Dalton's throat tightened. He'd spent 51 years not talking about October 12, 1973. 51 years pushing the memories down deep where they couldn't surface during daylight hours. They came out at night anyway, in dreams that woke him gasping. "I don't know if I can," Dalton said. Wyatt reached across the table, placed his hand over Dalton's weathered fingers. "You don't have to," Wyatt said, "but I think maybe you need to." Dalton looked down at Wyatt's hand, at the tattoos on his knuckles, at the calluses that spoke of hard work and harder living. He thought about Garrett Brennan, 22 years old and drowning. He thought about the 27 he couldn't save. He thought about carrying this weight alone for 5 decades. Maybe Wyatt was right. Maybe he needed to put it down. Dalton took a breath, let it out slowly. "October 12th, 1,973 inches, he began. "We were 8 days out of Subic Bay, heading for training exercises near Guam. The weather report said clear skies." His hands wrapped around the coffee mug. The warmth helped, gave him something solid to hold on to. The storm came out of nowhere. One minute we're cruising at 20 knots under blue sky. Next minute, the horizon goes black and the wind hits like a freight train. The cafe had gone quiet again, but this time it was different. This time people were listening. Really listening. "Typhoon Irma," Dalton continued. "Category 5, winds over 150 miles per hour, waves tall as buildings. The Constellation was a supercarrier, 90,000 tons. That storm tossed her like a toy boat in a bathtub." He could see it behind his eyes, feel the deck tilting at impossible angles, hear the screaming metal and screaming men. "I was 27 years old, rescue swimmer. My job was to jump into the water when someone went overboard, save them before the ocean took them." He looked at Wyatt. "That day, 30 men went overboard in the first 10 minutes. 30. Swept away by waves that came over the flight deck. We were supposed to be safe up there, 100 feet above the waterline. But those waves didn't care." Dalton's voice was steady now. "Detached, the way you had to be detached to survive remembering. I tied a fire hose around my waist. Regulations said use proper safety harness, but we didn't have time. Men were dying every second we wasted. I tied a fire hose like a belt and I jumped." He remembered the moment of jumping, the brief weightlessness, then the impact of water, hard as concrete. The ocean was cold, colder than you'd think that close to the equator, cold enough to stop your heart in 15 minutes, cold enough to burn your skin like fire. He closed his eyes. "First jump, I got Seaman Rodriguez. 19 years old from Texas. Broken arm, swallowing water going under. I grabbed him and the wave slammed us both into the hull. I felt ribs crack. Couldn't tell if they were his or mine. Didn't matter. I got the hose around him and they pulled us up. Dalton opened his eyes. The cafe swam back into focus. Rodriguez lived, got discharged medical, went home to his family. He took a sip of coffee. The taste grounded him. Second jump was for Ensign Williams, 24, officer, good man. He'd gone unconscious, sank like a stone. I dove down maybe 15 feet. Black water, couldn't see anything. Just reached out and prayed my hand would find something. His fingers twitched with the memory. I grabbed fabric, his uniform shirt, pulled him up. He wasn't breathing when we got to the deck. Korsman did CPR. Williams vomited seawater and lived. 2 saves, 3 more to go before the failure started. Third jump was your father. Wyatt went very still. Hospital corpsman Garrett Brennan, Dalton said. 22 years old. From Montana, I think. Or maybe Idaho. Midwest somewhere. He couldn't swim. Dalton looked at Wyatt and saw Garrett's face overlaid on his son's features. He was panicking. Worst thing a drowning person can do. When I reached him, he grabbed my neck with both hands, tried to climb me like a ladder, pushed me underwater. The memory was visceral. The crushing grip, the water closing over his head. The realization that they were both going to die. I punched him, Dalton said flatly. Right hook to the jaw, knocked him out cold. Standard rescue procedure when someone's drowning you. I got my arm around his chest and signaled for them to pull us up. He could still feel Garrett's dead weight. Still remember thinking he'd killed the kid with that punch. He woke up on deck, started crying, kept saying thank you. I told him to shut up and let the corpsman check him. Dalton's hands trembled around the coffee mug. I wanted to jump again. There were 27 more men in the water. 27. I could hear them screaming. I could see them. Right there, close enough to reach, his voice cracked. But the fire hose had snapped. No safety line. The captain wouldn't let me jump without a tether. Said I'd just add 1 more body to the count. The next part was hardest. Lieutenant Mason was the last one I saw clearly. 28 years old. Wedding ring on his finger. He looked right at me, made eye contact. The wave took him, and he was gone. Silence filled the cafe like water filling a sinking ship. We recovered 3 bodies that day, Dalton said. 24 were never found. The ocean kept them. He looked down at the Navy Cross hanging against his coffee-stained shirt. They gave me this for saving 3 men. I wanted to throw it in the ocean with the 27 I couldn't save. Wyatt's face was wet with tears. Dad talked about you in his sleep, Wyatt said. His voice was thick. He'd shout, Chief Pierce, the rope, snapped over and over. I never understood. Now I do. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He wasn't shouting in fear. He was trying to warn you, trying to save you the way you saved him. The weight in Dalton's chest shifted. Not lighter, just different. Your father was a good man, Dalton said. I'm sorry the war followed him home. It followed you too, Wyatt said. Didn't it? Dalton nodded slowly. Every night, he admitted. For 51 years, same dream, 27 hands reaching up, and I can't grab any of them. Forge, the big biker, spoke for the first time. His voice was surprisingly soft. My dad was Army, came home in 73, hung himself in 89. I was 15. Viper nodded. Uncle Jimmy, Marines, Korea, pills and whiskey in 95. One by one, the bikers shared their losses. Fathers, uncles, brothers who came home from war, but never really came home, who fought battles every night that no one else could see. Dalton listened and felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, opening, like ice thawing after a long winter. These men understood. They'd grown up in the shadow of war just like Wyatt had. Just like Dalton's son Nathaniel had before Iraq took him. That's why we ride, Wyatt said. Every Tuesday, memorial ride for the ones who didn't make it home, and for the ones who came home but couldn't stay. He gestured to his vest. The Hells Angels patch with its skull and wings. People see this and think we're outlaws, criminals, dangerous. A small smile touched his scarred face. Maybe we are, but we're also sons of veterans, brothers of veterans, and we take care of our own. Wyatt stood, pulled something from his vest pocket, a card, simple white stock with black text. Veterans Memorial Ride, Wyatt said, placing the card on the table in front of Dalton. This Saturday, we ride from here to the VA hospital, raise money for mental health services, honor the ones we lost. He looked at Dalton with hope and grief mixed in equal measure. Chief Pierce, would you ride with us? Dalton stared at the card. I can't ride, he said. Knees are shot, hips worse. I can barely walk some days. Kodiak's got a sidecar, Wyatt said. Most comfortable seat in Oregon. You won't have to do anything but sit and be honored the way you deserve. The biker called Kodiak nodded. He was massive, easily 6'6" and 300 pounds of muscle and ink. Custom rig, Kodiak said. His voice was a bass rumble. Built it for my dad before he passed. You'd be doing me an honor, Chief. Dalton looked around the table, at 7 faces watching him with something he hadn't seen directed at him in years. Respect, not pity, not awkward appreciation from people who didn't know what to do with old veterans. Real respect from men who understood what it cost. I don't know, Dalton said. Think about it, Wyatt said gently. You've got till Saturday. Movement caught Dalton's eye. Colton was standing at the corner table. His face had changed. The smugness was gone. Something else had taken its place. Something that looked almost like shame. He walked toward Dalton's table slowly. His colleagues stayed behind, but Colton came forward alone. The bikers tensed. Forge started to stand. Wyatt held up a hand. Waited. Colton stopped 3 feet from the table. His hands opened and closed at his sides, nervous. Sir, he said. His voice was quiet. Nothing like the loud, confident mockery from before. Chief Pierce, I need to say something. Dalton looked at him. Really looked. Under the expensive suit and styled hair was someone younger than Dalton had thought. Maybe not even 30 yet. A kid playing at being important. I was wrong, Colton said. Completely wrong. What I did was... He swallowed hard. There's no excuse. He pulled out his wallet, opened it. Inside was a photo. An old man in a military uniform. Marines, Dalton thought. The dress blues were distinctive. This was my grandfather, Colton said. Sterling Ashford, Iwo Jima, 1945. He stared at the photo. He raised me after my parents divorced. Tried to tell me stories about the war, about service, about sacrifice. I was too busy, too focused on my career, too important to listen to an old man talk about ancient history. Colton's voice cracked. He died 6 years ago. Last thing he said to me was, promise me you'll respect the men who served, even if you don't understand. A tear ran down Colton's face. I promised, and today I broke that promise. I dishonored him. I dishonored you. He looked at Dalton with red-rimmed eyes. I can't take back what I did. I can't unhurt you, but I need you to know I'm sorry, truly sorry. Dalton studied him, saw genuine remorse, saw a young man confronting what he'd become. What's your grandfather's full name? Dalton asked. Sterling James Ashford, Gunnery Sergeant, 3rd Marine Division. Dalton nodded slowly. Iwo Jima was 36 days of hell, Dalton said. Marines who fought there were the toughest sons of bitches in the Pacific. Your grandfather was a warrior. He gestured to the empty chair at his table. Sit down. Colton hesitated. Looked at Wyatt. Wyatt shrugged slightly. Your call, the gesture said. Colton sat carefully like the chair might collapse under him. You want to honor your grandfather? Dalton asked. Colton nodded. Then listen, and learn, and do better. Dalton leaned back in his chair. Your grandfather survived Iwo Jima, came home, raised a family, including you. That's victory. That's what we fought for. Not for glory, not for medals, for the chance to come home and live. He touched the Navy Cross. I wear this because 27 men don't get to wear anything anymore. I wear it so someone remembers their names. That's all medals are. Memory made metal. Colton listened with the intensity of someone trying to memorize every word. You want to apologize? Dalton said. Then do something worth your grandfather's sacrifice. Use your money, your success, your privilege. Make the world a little less cruel for the people who served. Colton's jaw set. How? He asked. Tell me how, and I'll do it. Wyatt leaned forward. Saturday's ride, he said. We're raising money for a mental health wing at the VA hospital. We need $50,000. We've got maybe $15,000 pledged. He looked at Colton. You closed a $2 million deal today. You said so yourself. Loud enough for the whole café to hear. Colton went pale, then red, then something harder settled over his features. He pulled out his phone, tapped and swiped for 30 seconds. Then he turned the screen toward Wyatt. A bank transfer confirmation. $200,000 to Crescent Bay Veterans Foundation. My grandfather left me money, Colton said. I've been sitting on it, didn't know what to do with it. Now I do. Wyatt's eyes widened. That's, he started. Not enough, Colton said. But it's a start. I'll raise more. I'll get my company involved. I'll make this right. He looked at Dalton. Can you forgive me? Dalton thought about Garrett Brennan, about a 22-year-old kid who panicked and nearly drowned them both, about second chances and redemption. Your grandfather would forgive you, Dalton said. So do I. He extended his hand. Colton took it. His grip was firm but trembling. Thank you, sir. Call me Dalton and sit with us. Learn what service really means. For the next hour, the table filled with stories. Wyatt told Dalton about his father's final years, the nightmares, the flashbacks, the desperate attempts to help other veterans that kept Garrett going even when his own pain was overwhelming. The other bikers shared their own histories. Their fathers and uncles and brothers who served and suffered and survived as long as they could. Colton listened and asked questions and slowly transformed from smug businessman to student learning a lesson he should have learned years ago. Iris brought food no one had ordered, eggs and bacon and pancakes that appeared like magic. She refused payment from anyone. Other customers stopped by the table, older men who'd served, younger people who had family in the military. They shook Dalton's hand, thanked him. Some cried. Dalton felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Not happiness exactly, but something close. Connection, community, the sense that maybe he wasn't quite as alone as he'd thought. By 10 o'clock, the cafe had filled completely. Word had spread somehow. Social media, Dalton guessed. Those phones that had filmed his humiliation were now spreading something else. People wanted to meet the Navy Cross recipient who Hell's Angels protected. Dalton was exhausted but couldn't bring himself to leave. Wyatt finally stood. Chief, he said, we should let you rest, but before we go, he removed his Hell's Angels vest. Underneath, he wore a black t-shirt. On the front in white letters, Garrett Brennan, 1951 to 1998, never forgotten. Wyatt turned around. On his back was a tattoo, a massive piece that covered his entire shoulder blade and half his spine. It showed a ship in a storm, waves towering, lightning splitting the sky, and a figure diving into the water rope tied around his waist, reaching for a drowning man. I got this 10 years ago, Wyatt said, based on Dad's description of that day. Of you, he turned back around. You saved my father. You gave me 26 years with him. Broken years sometimes, hard years. But they were mine because of you. Wyatt's voice strengthened. I can't give those years back to the 27 you lost, but I can make sure their sacrifice meant something. That's why we ride. That's why we raise money. That's why we fight for veterans who can't fight anymore. He held out his hand. Ride with us Saturday, Chief. Let us honor you. Let us show the world what real heroism looks like. Dalton looked at that outstretched hand. Looked at 7 bikers who'd walked into a cafe and changed everything. Looked at Colton transformed from tormentor to student. Looked at the Navy Cross that had hung hidden for 51 years and now caught the morning light like a beacon. He thought about Vivian, who'd begged him for years to be proud of what he'd done. He thought about Nathaniel, who'd worn this same cap with pride. He thought about 27 men who'd never get another chance to be honored. Dalton stood, his knees protested but held. He took Wyatt's hand. I'll ride, he said. The cafe erupted in applause. Saturday morning arrived wrapped in October fog that clung to Crescent Bay like a second skin. Dalton woke at 5 instead of 6, pulled from sleep by anticipation instead of nightmares for the first time in months. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to his heart beat steady and strong. 78 years old and his pulse raced like a young man's. Fear, maybe, or excitement. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt excited about anything. The Navy Cross sat on his nightstand where he'd placed it last night. Not hidden in the wooden box, not tucked under his shirt. Out in the open where morning light caught the bronze and made it glow. Dalton reached for it slowly. His arthritic fingers fumbled with the ribbon, but eventually got it fastened around his neck. This time he didn't hide it under his shirt. The metal hung against his chest, visible, declaring something he'd spent 51 years trying to forget. He was a hero whether he felt like one or not. The bathroom mirror showed him the same weathered face as always. But something in his eyes looked different, less hollow, less haunted, like a man who'd been holding his breath for 5 decades had finally exhaled. Dalton dressed carefully, clean jeans, a button-down shirt Vivian had bought him for their 50th anniversary. His USS Constellation cap washed and dried the letters bright again against dark fabric. Iris had taken it home Tuesday night and restored it somehow. Magic or miracle, Dalton didn't care which. He looked at himself in the full-length mirror Vivian had insisted on installing. An old man in old clothes wearing a medal he'd never wanted. "What do you think, Viv?" he asked the empty apartment. "Am I doing this right?" Silence answered, but it felt like a supportive silence. Like Vivian was watching and nodding, and maybe finally seeing him step into the light she'd always insisted he deserved. Dalton picked up the photo from his dresser. Vivian's smile captured in silver frame. He touched her face through the glass. "Wish you were here," he whispered. But maybe she was. Maybe they all were. Vivian, Nathaniel, the 27 whose names he still recited every night. Maybe the dead never really left. Maybe they just waited for the living to catch up. He set the photo down gently and walked to the kitchen. Coffee first. Always coffee first. While the machine hissed and gurgled, Dalton looked out the window. The fog was lifting, revealing patches of blue sky. Going to be a good day for riding. Wyatt had texted him that information yesterday, along with detailed instructions about when and where to meet. Dalton still wasn't entirely sure how he'd ended up with a cell phone. Iris had given it to him Wednesday morning, already programmed with numbers for her Wyatt and someone called Forge, who was apparently in charge of logistics. The phone buzzed now. Text message from Wyatt. "Morning, Chief. Weather's clearing. Perfect day to ride. Kodiak will pick you up at 0800. Wear something warm. Wind gets cold at highway speed." Dalton typed back slowly with 2 fingers. "Ready? Thank you." 3 dots appeared. Wyatt was typing. "Thank you, Chief. Dad would have loved this. See you soon." The phone went quiet. Dalton poured his coffee and sat at the small kitchen table. The apartment felt different this morning. Less like a tomb and more like a way station. A place to rest between one life and the next. He thought about Tuesday morning, about Colton's transformation from tormentor to student, about 7 bikers who'd walked through a door and rewritten Dalton's story in the space of an hour. The world was strange, full of angels in leather and demons in suits. You couldn't judge by appearances. You had to look deeper. Look for the actions that revealed character. Wyatt Brennan had revealed his character completely, and Dalton found himself grateful beyond words that Garrett's son had found him, even if it was 26 years too late to thank Garrett himself. At 7:45, Dalton put on the leather jacket Wraith had loaned him. It was too big in the shoulders, but warm and smelled like motor oil and freedom. He checked his pockets, wallet, keys, phone, everything a modern person needed to exist in the world. The Navy Cross hung outside his shirt, impossible to miss. Dalton locked his apartment door and walked downstairs to wait on the curb. The fog had burned off completely. Skies stretched blue and endless overhead, the kind of sky that made you believe in possibilities. At exactly 8 o'clock, Dalton heard it, the rumble of a motorcycle engine, deep and throaty, more felt than heard. The sound vibrated through his chest like a second heartbeat. A massive bike rounded the corner, cherry red paint job, chrome gleaming, and attached to the right side a sidecar that looked like something from a World War II movie, updated with modern suspension and padded leather seats. Kodiak rode the bike with casual expertise. He was even bigger than Dalton remembered. The motorcycle looked normal-sized under him, which meant it was probably enormous. Kodiak pulled up to the curb and cut the engine. The sudden silence felt loud. "Morning, Chief," Kodiak said. His voice was surprisingly gentle for a man that size. "You ready for this?" Dalton looked at the sidecar, at the tiny windscreen that would do almost nothing to block wind, at the open cockpit that promised speed and exposure and everything his cautious old life had trained him to avoid. "Ready," he said. Kodiak grinned. His smile transformed his scarred face into something almost boyish. "Let me help you in." Getting into the sidecar required careful maneuvering. Dalton's knees didn't bend like they used to. His hips seized halfway through. But Kodiak was patient, and eventually Dalton settled into the seat. It was comfortable, surprisingly so. The leather was butter soft. The seat was contoured to support his back. Kodiak had even installed a small heater that blew warm air across Dalton's legs. "My dad had bad circulation," Kodiak explained, strapping Dalton in with a safety harness. "Built this rig for him before cancer took him. He only got to ride it twice. Been waiting for the right person to use it again." He straightened and looked Dalton in the eye. "You're the right person, Chief." Dalton's throat tightened. He managed a nod. Kodiak handed him a helmet. Not a full-face modern thing, a vintage half-helmet that would protect his skull, but leave his face open to the wind. "Rules of the road," Kodiak said. You feel sick, tap my leg twice. You need to stop, tap 3 times. You're having the time of your life, just hang on and enjoy. He swung his leg over the motorcycle with practiced ease. Oh, and Chief, you might want to hold on to something when we start. She's got some power. The engine roared to life. Dalton grabbed the handles built into the sidecar frame. Kodiak pulled away from the curb, smoothly accelerating with steady pressure that pressed Dalton back into his seat. They rolled through Crescent Bay's quiet morning streets, past houses where people were just waking up, past the park where Dalton stopped every Tuesday to salute the memorial. They turned onto Harbor Street and Dalton saw it. The Harbor Cafe parking lot was filled with motorcycles. Not 7, 50 at least, maybe more. They lined up in neat rows, chrome-catching sunlight, leather-clad riders standing beside their bikes like soldiers at attention. Kodiak pulled into the lot and the riders turned as one. Then they started clapping. The sound rolled over Dalton like a wave, hands striking together in rhythmic applause that echoed off buildings. People emerged from the cafe. Iris, her employees, customers who'd come early to watch. Wyatt stepped forward from the crowd. He wore his Hells Angels vest over a white shirt. The vest was covered in patches. Memorial patches, Dalton realized. Names and dates of fallen veterans. Chief Pierce Wyatt's voice carried across the parking lot. Welcome to the 27th Annual Veterans Memorial Ride. 27th Annual. The number hit Dalton like a fist. One ride for each of the men he couldn't save. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe Wyatt had planned this deliberately. Made sure Dalton knew that the 27 were remembered by more than just nightmares. Wyatt walked to the sidecar and helped Dalton climb out. Dalton's legs were shaky, but held. Speech, someone called from the crowd. Speech, others echoed. Dalton looked at Wyatt in panic. He hadn't prepared anything. Didn't know what to say to 50 bikers and what looked like 100 spectators who'd gathered to watch. Just speak from your heart, Wyatt said quietly. That's all they want. Dalton turned to face the crowd. So many faces, young and old, men and women, all looking at him with expectation and respect. He cleared his throat. I'm not good at speeches, he began. His voice sounded small and rough. I'm just an old sailor who did his job. You're a hero, someone shouted. Dalton shook his head. No, the heroes are the ones who didn't come home. The 27 men from USS Constellation who died in Typhoon Irma. Rodriguez, Mason, Williams, Chen. He recited the names from memory. All 27. The litany he'd repeated every night for 51 years. The parking lot was silent except for Dalton's voice naming the dead. When he finished, he looked at the crowd. I wear this medal for them, he said, touching the Navy Cross. I ride today for them and for every veteran who served and suffered and didn't get the welcome home they deserved. He paused. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for caring. Thank you for showing this old man that honor isn't dead. It just sometimes wears leather and rides motorcycles. The crowd erupted. Not just applause this time. Cheers. Whistles. Dalton saw tears on weathered faces. Wyatt embraced him hard. Dad would have loved you, Wyatt whispered. Hell, I love you, Chief. I love you too, son, Dalton said, and meant it. Movement at the edge of the parking lot caught his attention. 3 men in business casual approached nervously. Colton, Brendan, Quincy. Colton carried a large check printed on poster board, the kind they gave away at charity events. He walked straight to Wyatt and Dalton. Chief Pierce, Colton said formally, on behalf of Ashford Development Corporation and in memory of Gunnery Sergeant Sterling James Ashford, USMC, I present this donation to the Crescent Bay Veterans Foundation. He turned the check around. $250,000. Gas rippled through the crowd. You said $200,000 on Tuesday? Wyatt said, stunned. I talked to my board, Colton said. Told them what I'd done, what I'd learned. They agreed to match my personal donation and add $50,000 more. He looked at Dalton. It's not enough to make up for what I did, but it's a start. Dalton shook his hand. Your grandfather would be proud. Colton's eyes were wet. I brought something else, he said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. Old, faded. A young Marine in dress blues standing in front of an American flag. Sterling Ashford, Colton said. 1945. He's buried at Crescent Bay Memorial. I was hoping, if it's not too much, maybe we could ride past there today, so I can introduce you properly. Wyatt clapped Colton on the shoulder. Consider it done. He turned to the assembled riders. Mount up, we've got veterans to honor. The parking lot exploded into motion. Riders swung onto bikes. Engines roared to life one by one, creating a symphony of mechanical thunder that shook the ground. Dalton climbed back into the sidecar with Kodiak's help. The safety harness clicked into place. The helmet settled over his white hair. Wyatt pulled up beside them on a black and chrome monster of a bike. Forge took position on Wyatt's left, Viper on his right. The other Hells Angels filled in around them, creating a protective formation. Behind them, 40 more motorcycles formed up in neat rows. Wyatt raised his hand. The engines quieted to idle rumbling like contained thunder. "Brothers and sisters," Wyatt called out, "we ride today in memory of those who served, those who died, those who came home broken, and those who showed us what honor really means." He looked at Dalton. "We ride for Chief Petty Officer Dalton Pierce and the 27 sailors of USS Constellation who gave their lives in Typhoon Irma, October 12, 1973. Wyatt's hand dropped. "Roll out." The motorcycles surged forward as one. Dalton had never felt anything like it. The wind hit his face like a living thing, cold and clean and honest. The engine's vibration traveled through the sidecar frame into his bones. The world blurred past at speeds that made his heart race. But it wasn't fear, it was life. Pure, undiluted, absolutely present life. They rode through Crescent Bay with American flags snapping from antenna masts. People came out of houses to watch, stood on sidewalks and waved. Some saluted, children pointed and stared. Dalton waved back, grinning like a fool. The formation turned onto Harbor Boulevard, heading for the highway. But first they made a stop. Veterans Memorial Park. 50 motorcycles pulled into the parking lot in perfect synchronization. Engines cut off. Silence fell like a benediction. The riders dismounted and formed up in rows facing the black granite wall with its carved names. Wyatt helped Dalton from the sidecar. Together they walked to the memorial. Dalton had stopped here every Tuesday for 12 years, but he'd always stopped alone. Quick salute, 3 seconds, move on. Now he stood with 50 people who understood. The 27, Wyatt said. He'd printed their names on a banner that Forge and Viper now unfurled. Lieutenant Marcus James Mason, Seaman First Class Anthony Rodriguez, Ensign Robert Williams. All 27 names in gold letters on blue fabric. "Present arms," Wyatt commanded. 50 hands rose in salute. Perfect, synchronized, held for exactly 3 seconds. Dalton saluted too. Tears ran down his weathered face and he didn't care who saw. "Order arms." The salute dropped. Wyatt produced a wreath. Simple. Green leaves, white flowers, red, white, and blue ribbon. He handed it to Dalton. "You should place it, Chief." Dalton carried the wreath to the wall, found the section for Navy, laid the wreath at the base with shaking hands. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," he whispered. "I'm sorry it took 51 years to honor you publicly. I'm sorry for everything I couldn't do." A hand touched his shoulder. "Wyatt. They know, Chief. Wherever they are, they know. And they forgive you." "How can you be sure?" "Because Dad forgave you. And you saved him. The ones you couldn't reach understand it wasn't your fault." Dalton straightened slowly, turned to face the assembled riders. "Thank you," he said, "for making them matter." "They always mattered," Wyatt said. "We're just making sure everyone else knows it too." Back on the bikes, back into formation, this time heading for the highway. The on-ramp rose before them like a promise. Kodiak accelerated smoothly, and suddenly they were flying, 60 miles per hour, the sidecar stable and secure despite the speed. Dalton laughed, actually laughed out loud. The sound tore from his throat unbidden. Joy, pure and simple. When was the last time he'd felt joy? The highway stretched ahead, cutting through Oregon pine forests. Mountains rose in the distance, snow-capped and eternal. The sky was impossibly blue. They rode for 20 minutes in tight formation. Other cars pulled aside to let them pass. Some honked in support, others just stared. Dalton didn't care. He was alive. More alive than he'd felt since Vivian died. Maybe more alive than he'd felt since the typhoon. The formation exited the highway near Crescent Bay Memorial Cemetery. Sterling Ashford's grave was in the veterans section. Rows of white headstones marched across perfect green grass. American flags marked every grave. Colton led them to his grandfather's plot. The headstone read, "Sterling James Ashford, Gunnery Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, 1923 to 2018. Iwo Jima, February-March, 1945. Semper Fidelis." The motorcycles formed a semicircle around the grave. Riders dismounted and stood at attention. Colton knelt and placed his hand on the stone. "Grandpa," he said. His voice shook. "I brought someone to meet you." Chief Dalton Pierce, Navy Cross recipient, the kind of man you wanted me to respect. He looked up at Dalton. I'm sorry I didn't listen while you were alive. I'm listening now. Dalton knelt beside Colton, ignoring his protesting knees. Gunnery Sergeant Ashford, Dalton said formally, your grandson is a good man. He made a mistake, but he's correcting it. You raised him right. He just needed a reminder. He touched the headstone. Thank you for your service, Marine. Iwo Jima was hell. You survived and came home and built a life. That's victory. That's what we all fought for. Colton was crying openly now. Dalton put his arm around the young man's shoulders. He forgives you, Dalton said. I promise. The dead are more generous than the living. They understand mistakes. They knelt there together for a long moment. Old sailor and young businessman, connected by grief and grace in the long shadow of war. Finally they stood. The riders saluted Sterling Ashford's grave. 50 hands, perfect synchronization. 3 seconds. Then they rode on. The VA hospital sat on the outskirts of town, a sprawling complex of buildings that served 3 counties. Wyatt had coordinated with the hospital director, so staff and patients were waiting when the motorcycles pulled into the main parking lot. Wheelchairs lined the entrance. Some held young men missing legs or arms. Others held older men, Korea veterans whose battles were fought decades ago but never ended. The riders dismounted. Wyatt organized them into a corridor leading from the parking lot to the entrance. For the patients, he explained to Dalton, they'll walk between us. Show them respect. Show them they matter. The hospital director, a small woman with iron gray hair and kind eyes, approached with a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, the Crescent Bay Veterans Foundation has raised $250,000 for our new mental health wing. Applause erupted from patients and staff. This wing will provide counseling, PTSD treatment, and suicide prevention services for veterans in crisis. It will save lives. She paused. The foundation has requested that we name this wing in honor of 2 men, Hospital Corpsman Garrett Brennan, who served with distinction and struggled with invisible wounds, and Chief Petty Officer Dalton Pierce, who saved Corpsman Brennan's life and continues to honor all who served. More applause. Louder now. The Brennan Pierce Mental Health Wing will open next spring, but today we celebrate the men who made it possible. She gestured to Wyatt and Dalton. Gentlemen, would you do us the honor of unveiling the dedication plaque? Wyatt took Dalton's arm. Together they walked to where a brass plaque hung covered by a blue cloth. On 3, Wyatt said. 1, 2, 3. They pulled the cloth away. The plaque gleamed in afternoon sunlight. Brennan Pierce, Mental Health Wing, in memory of Hospital Corpsman Garrett Brennan, USN, in honor of Chief Petty Officer Dalton Pierce. USN for those who serve, for those who save them, and for those who remember. Dalton read the words through tears. Dedicated October 26, 2024 inches today. Right now. This moment. He looked at Wyatt and saw Garrett's eyes looking back. Saw a son honoring a father. Saw love transcending death and time and pain. Thank you, Dalton whispered. Thank you, Wyatt said, for giving me a father, for giving these veterans hope, for showing us what a hero looks like. The patients began moving through the corridor of riders. Each one paused to shake hands with Dalton. Some saluted. Some just nodded veteran to veteran, sharing understanding that needed no words. One young man, maybe 25, stopped his wheelchair directly in front of Dalton. Afghanistan, the young man said. His legs ended at the knees. IED outside Kandahar. Lost my platoon sergeant, 3 privates. Felt like my fault for months. He looked at Dalton's Navy Cross. Does it get easier, the guilt? Dalton knelt so they were eye level. No, he said honestly, but you learn to carry it with others. Find people who understand. Talk about it. Don't carry it alone like I did for 51 years. The young veteran's eyes were wet. My name's Christopher. Friends call me Chris. I'm Dalton, and I'm here every Tuesday at Harbor Cafe if you want to talk. Chris nodded. I'd like that, sir. Just Dalton? We're brothers. Brothers don't use sir. They shook hands, warrior to warrior across generations and wars. The afternoon wore on. More handshakes, more stories. More tears and laughter mixed together like rain and sunshine. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the Pacific, Wyatt gathered the riders. One more stop, he said, for the chief. They rode back into town as evening painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. The formation turned down streets Dalton recognized. His neighborhood, his apartment building. They pulled up in front and cut engines. What's this? Dalton asked. Iris stepped out from behind the building. She carried something wrapped in blue cloth. The cafe took a vote, she said. Unanimous decision. She unwrapped the cloth. A wooden plaque. Beautifully crafted. Brass corners, engraved letters. This table reserved Chief Petty Officer Dalton Pierce, USN Red Navy Cross recipient, USS Constellation 1968 to 1992, forever honored, never alone Tuesdays, 8:15 a.m. For your table, Iris said. So everyone knows you're not just welcome, you're essential. Dalton took the plaque with shaking hands. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep coming, Iris said. Say you'll keep telling stories. Say you'll be the heart of that cafe like you've been for 12 years, except now we're telling you so. I'll keep coming, Dalton promised. Wyatt stepped forward holding something else. A leather vest, black, well-worn, Hell's Angels patches on the back, but also new patches sewn onto the front. Honorary member Chief D. Pierce, USS Constellation, 1968 to 1992, Navy Cross, and across the shoulders in gold thread, the 27, never forgotten. We vote you in unanimous, Wyatt said. Honorary member of Hell's Angels, Crescent Bay chapter. You don't have to ride, don't have to do anything except be you, but you're family now. He helped Dalton into the vest. It fit perfectly. Dalton looked down at himself, at the patches declaring him worthy, at the Hell's Angels skull that society feared and he now wore with pride. I'm 78 years old, he said. I'm not sure how much use I'll be. You're a reminder, Forge said, of what we're fighting for, who we honor, why we ride. All 50 riders stood at attention. Welcome home, Chief, they said in unison. And Dalton Pierce, who'd felt homeless for 5 years despite having an apartment, finally understood what home meant. Not a place, a people. That night, Dalton sat at his kitchen table wearing the Hell's Angels vest. The Navy Cross hung outside his shirt. The plaque from the cafe rested against the wall. His phone buzzed. Text from Wyatt. Sleep well, Chief. See you Tuesday breakfast at 7 a.m. Whole crew will be there. Dalton smiled and typed back. I'll be there. Thank you for everything. 3 dots. Then, thank you for saving my dad, for giving me 26 years with him, for showing me what honor looks like. Love you, Chief. Love you too, son. Dalton set the phone down and looked at Vivian's photo. I did it, Viv, he said. I finally wore the medal in public. I finally let people see. And they didn't see a failure. They saw a hero. He touched her face through the glass. Wish you were here to see this. But maybe you are. Maybe you and Nathaniel and the 27 are all up there watching, shaking your heads at how long it took this stubborn old sailor to accept grace. The apartment was quiet, but no longer empty. Presence filled the space. Memory, love, connection. Dalton stood and walked to his bedroom. He didn't take off the vest, slept in it like armor against nightmares. That night, for the first time in 51 years, the dream was different. He stood on the deck of USS Constellation. The storm raged, the waves rose. But when he looked at the water, he didn't see drowning men. He saw Garrett Brennan safe on deck. He saw Rodriguez Williams and the third man he'd saved standing beside Garrett. He saw 27 figures in the water, but they weren't drowning. They were waving, not for help, in farewell, in forgiveness, in release. Lieutenant Mason smiled at him, young, whole, alive in whatever place the dead go. It's okay, Chief, Mason said. We're okay. You did enough. More than enough. Rest now. The 27 turned and walked into light. Dalton woke at dawn. His face was wet with tears, but his heart was light. For the first time in 5 decades, the weight had shifted. Not gone, never gone, but bearable, shared. Tuesday morning came and Dalton walked to Harbor Cafe at 7 o'clock instead of 8:15. The plaque was already mounted on his table. 7 bikers waited coffee-steaming chairs pulled close. Wyatt stood when Dalton entered. Morning, Chief. Morning, son. They embraced like family, because they were family now. Forged not by blood, but by service and sacrifice and second chances. Dalton sat at his table, surrounded by brothers he never knew he needed. The Navy Cross caught morning light. The Hell's Angels patch declared him worthy. And for the first time since October 12, 1973, Chief Petty Officer Dalton Pierce believed that maybe, just maybe, he'd earned the right to be called a hero after all. Not because he saved 3 men, but because he finally let himself be saved. The cafe filled with morning light and laughter and the sound of stories being told. Stories that would echo long after the storytellers were gone. Stories that mattered, because every veteran's story matters. And finally, Dalton understood that his story wasn't over. It was just beginning.